David killed Goliath with one stone. Most people think the age of giants ended in that valley. It did not. Years later, the Bible records 4 more warriors connected with the giant clans of Gath. One carried a bronze spearhead heavy enough to terrify an army and nearly ended David's life. Another belonged to the same line and fell in a second battle. A third carried a spear shaft like a weaver's beam. The fourth had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits in all. Yet the strangest detail is not their size. It is a sentence in 2 Samuel that appears to say a man named Elhanan killed Goliath the Gittite. 1 Samuel says David killed Goliath. 1 Chronicles says Elhanan killed Lami, the brother of Goliath. So was Goliath killed twice? Did the famous champion have a brother whose identity became tangled as the text was copied? And why does the story end by saying that all 4 fell by the hand of David when David personally defeated none of them in these scenes? To understand the final giants of Gath, we must return to the victory everyone remembers, and then follow David into the battles almost everyone forgets. The first battlefield lay in the valley of Elah. Israel occupied one ridge. The Philistines occupied the other. Between them stood open ground and a challenge that had frozen an army for 40 days. From the Philistine camp came Goliath of Gath. The Hebrew textual tradition describes him as 6 cubits and a span, while ancient witnesses, including the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Greek Septuagint, preserve a shorter reading of 4 cubits and a span. Either measurement presents an imposing champion, but the difference warns us against pretending that every detail is simple. His bronze armor was extraordinarily heavy. His spear shaft resembled a weaver's beam. A shield-bearer walked before him. The Bible describes equipment, origin, and effect. It does not describe his skin color, facial features, or exact modern height. Every giant seen in this film is therefore an artistic reconstruction. What the text makes unmistakable is scale. Goliath was the weapon Gath sent to make Israel surrender before armies met. David refused the logic of fear. He approached with a sling, selected stones, and trust in the God of Israel. The stone struck. The champion fell. The Philistine line broke. But Gath remained, and so did the lineage from which its champion had come. Gath was not merely a name attached to one warrior. It was one of the great Philistine cities, positioned in the contested country west of Judah's hills. Joshua remembers Gath as one of the places where remnants of the Anakim remained. 1 Samuel repeatedly identifies Goliath as the Gittite, the man of Gath. Later, when David fled from Saul, he entered the orbit of the same Philistine city. Gath became enemy stronghold, place of refuge, political danger, and memory of giants all at once. The later accounts use the word Rapha in expressions commonly translated as descendants of the giants. Rapha may function as an ancestral name or a label associated with the Rephaim tradition, but the text does not provide a complete family tree. It does not say that every tall Philistine was an Nephilim. It does not explain how these warriors related biologically to figures before the flood. It gives us a narrower claim. 4 formidable men were associated with the line of Rapha in Gath. One of them is specifically called Goliath's brother in Chronicles. The others should not be turned into brothers merely because later readers want a neat family portrait. The setting matters because it changes the visual world around the giants. This is not the empty sand of a distant wilderness. The Shephelah is a country of rolling limestone ridges, seasonal streams, olive groves, fields and roads running between the coastal plain and the higher country of Judah. A fortified Gath could command movement through that borderland. Its warriors would see Judah's hills to the east and Philistine territory opening toward the sea. Archaeology can illuminate the scale and culture of Philistine cities, but no excavated skeleton or weapon can securely be assigned to these 4 men. We should therefore resist 2 opposite temptations: treating every reconstruction as a photograph of the past, or treating every difficult detail as meaningless legend. The film can make the city, armor, and bodies tangible while the narration keeps the boundary clear. Historical setting is evidence. Cinematic appearance is interpretation. By the time these 4 conflicts appear, David is no longer the untested figure running into the valley. He is the center of a kingdom, the leader around whom Israel's future has gathered. 2 Samuel says war arose again between the Philistines and Israel. David went down with his servants, and during the fighting David grew weary. The sentence is brief, but it changes the entire shape of the giant story. The young man who once volunteered when experienced soldiers stepped backward now reaches the limit of his strength. Scripture does not mock him for it. Age, accumulated conflict, and human exhaustion are allowed into the frame. Then Ishbi-Benob, described as one of the descendants of the giant, sees the moment. His bronze spearhead weighs 300 shekels, roughly half the weight assigned to Goliath's spearhead in 1 Samuel. He is newly armed and intends to strike David. This is not a replay of Elah. David is not standing alone by choice before an arranged champion. He is vulnerable inside a larger battle, and a giant warrior moves toward the lamp of Israel. Abishai son of Zeruiah comes to David's aid. The text gives no long speech, no private hesitation, and no cinematic duel. It simply says Abishai helped him and struck the Philistine. The danger passes. David survives because another warrior reaches him in time. Then his men make him swear that he will no longer go out with them to battle, so that he will not quench the lamp of Israel. The image is extraordinary. David's value can no longer be measured only by what his own hand can accomplish. A lamp gives direction to an entire house. If it is extinguished, everyone loses light. The servants who once followed David now protect him, and that protection is not cowardice. It is strategy, loyalty, and recognition that the kingdom is larger than one heroic moment. The first of the 4 giants therefore teaches something the valley of Elah could not. Faithfulness sometimes means advancing toward the threat, and sometimes means allowing faithful people to stand between you and it. The phrase, Lamp of Israel, also turns the scene from personal survival into national consequence. Earlier, David could risk himself because he was one unknown volunteer among thousands. Now his death could fracture command, memory, and hope. His men are not saying that he has become weak or useless. They are saying that the role has changed. The same man who once refused Saul's armor must now accept the protection of those he trained. That reversal gives the episode emotional weight far beyond the physical size of Ishbi-Benob. The giant sees a tired opponent. Abishai sees the lamp. One looks for a vulnerable body. The other sees everything that body represents. The biblical narrator spends only a few lines on the event, but those lines contain an entire transition from the age of the solitary champion to the age of shared leadership. The account moves quickly to another war with the Philistines. 2 Samuel locates it at Gob. Chronicles names Gezer. There Sibbecai the Hushathite strikes Saph, whom Chronicles calls Sippai. Again, the parallel accounts preserve slightly different forms. Such differences are not hidden at the edges of obscure manuscripts. They are visible when the passages are placed side by side. The responsible response is neither panic nor invention. Ancient names can shift in spelling as languages, scribes, and copying traditions transmit them. Locations may reflect alternate naming, a broader campaign, or a textual difference we can no longer reconstruct with certainty. The central event remains stable. Another warrior associated with the giant line meets one of David's servants, and David's servant prevails. The narrative is deliberately stripping the giant tradition of its dependence on a single famous hero. Goliath fell before David. Saph falls before Sibbecai. The courage that once appeared exceptional has become shared. Then we reach the sentence that has disturbed attentive readers for centuries. 2 Samuel says there was war again at Gob, and Elhanan son of Jeroham the Bethlehemite struck down Goliath the Gittite, whose spear shaft was like a weaver's beam. Read by itself, the line sounds direct. Elhanan killed Goliath. But 1 Samuel has already narrated David's victory over Goliath in extensive detail. 1 Chronicles recounts the later battle differently. Elhanan son of Jair struck down Lami, the brother of Goliath the Gittite, whose spear shaft was like a weaver's beam. Chronicles supplies both a different victim and a slightly different form of the father's name. This is not something an honest film should conceal. Nor should it announce, with false confidence, that one quick answer has solved every difficulty. Many scholars and translators understand Chronicles to preserve the clearer or earlier reading. On this view, Elhanan killed Lami, Goliath's brother, and the wording in Samuel became compressed or disturbed during transmission. Hebrew letters were copied by hand for generations. A phrase identifying the brother of Goliath could be lost, divided incorrectly, or drawn into a nearby name. The unusual form Jeroham in Samuel is especially interesting because origin means weavers, and the same verse ends with a weaver's beam. Some readers see signs that words from one part of the line affected another. Several modern translations therefore insert "the brother of" into Samuel or explain the problem in a footnote. Others translate the Masoretic wording as it stands and allow the tension to remain visible. A minority proposal suggests that Elhanan may have been David's original name or that Goliath functioned as a title, but neither explanation is stated by the biblical text, and both create further questions. The most cautious conclusion is simple. The two parallel passages do not have identical wording. Chronicles explicitly names Lami as Goliath's brother, and a copying problem in Samuel is a strong possibility rather than a fact we can watch happen. Textual transmission is often imagined as a choice between perfect mechanical copying and complete unreliability. Ancient manuscripts show a more human picture. Scribes preserved large works with remarkable care, yet individual letters, repeated words, and similar endings could still create local problems. When multiple witnesses survive, their differences help scholars identify where a line may have changed. The difficulty in Samuel is visible precisely because the larger tradition was not erased to hide it. The fuller David and Goliath account remains. The Chronicles parallel remains. The awkward wording remains. Readers can compare them. That openness does not make the question disappear, but it lets us distinguish a problem in one short line from the stability of the surrounding narrative. Honesty about the line is not an attack on Scripture. It is respect for the form in which Scripture has actually reached us. This textual mystery does not erase David from the story. It reveals why parallel accounts matter. If only Samuel survived, readers would face a severe collision between two statements in the same broad history. Because Chronicles preserves a closely related account, we can see a plausible earlier shape. Elhanan defeated Lami, a warrior related to Goliath and equipped with the same terrifying kind of spear. The repeated weaver's beam may have functioned like a family signature, a military tradition, or simply a way of describing an enormous shaft. Scripture does not tell us. Visually, we can distinguish Lami from Goliath, but his face, armor, and height remain reconstruction. Biblically, the important point is that the shadow of Goliath did not belong to one man alone. Gath could send another champion carrying the visual language of the first. Yet a second champion also fell, not before David, but before Elhanan. The final encounter returns directly to Gath. There the text introduces an unnamed man of great stature. Unlike the other warriors, one feature of his body is counted with precision. 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all. The passage does not call him a monster, demon, or hybrid. It describes a human warrior with an unusual physical trait and says he too was descended from Rapha. In modern medicine, extra fingers or toes are known as polydactyly, a real variation that can occur in human families. The Bible does not offer a medical diagnosis, however, and we should not force one backward onto an ancient individual. The counted digits serve the story as a memorable sign that this opponent was extraordinary. When he taunts Israel, Jonathan, son of Shemaiah, David's brother, strikes him down. This Jonathan is not Saul's son, David's famous friend. He belongs to David's extended family. Once again, another name replaces David at the point of action. For a visual reconstruction, this unnamed warrior is both powerful and difficult. Extra digits must be shown without turning a real human variation into horror. The camera should establish his stature, confidence, and place among the warriors of Gath before briefly revealing the counted hands. His feat need not become a spectacle. The biblical detail is memorable because it is precise, not because the narrator invites ridicule. Even his taunt connects him to Goliath's pattern. A champion tries to convert extraordinary presence into fear. Jonathan's response breaks that pattern. The text does not tell us what Jonathan said, what weapon he carried, or how long the encounter lasted. Silence is more honest than invented dialogue. A wide, restrained confrontation can preserve the scale while refusing to create graphic action Scripture never describes. For encounters now stand together. Ishbi-Benob moves against a weary David and is stopped by Abishai. Saph or Sippai falls before Sibbecai. Lami, if Chronicles preserves the clearer wording, falls before Elhanan. The unnamed man with 24 digits falls before Jonathan. 2 Samuel concludes that these 4 were descended from Rapha in Gath and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. That phrase explains the apparent paradox. Ancient histories can attribute a victory to a king or commander even when his soldiers perform the individual actions. David's hand includes the people he leads, the courage he has cultivated, and the kingdom acting under his authority. Yet the verse also names his servants, refusing to make them disappear. David defeated Goliath. David's men defeated the surviving challenge from Gath. The legacy of one faithful act became a pattern others could inhabit. This also corrects a popular image. The Bible does not present David as a solitary giant hunter who personally eliminates every towering enemy. His greatest later victory may be accepting that the battle no longer depends on him alone. Abishai preserves the lamp. Sibbecai confronts Saph. Elhanan faces the spear like a weaver's beam. Jonathan answers the taunt at Gath. None becomes as famous as the shepherd in the valley, but the text remembers all four. Courage has multiplied. The enemy tries to reproduce the terror of Goliath, while Israel reproduces the faith that resisted him. A giant can dominate a frame and still fail to control the outcome. The camera may be drawn to extraordinary size, armor, and anatomy, but Scripture draws our attention toward loyalty, shared responsibility, and the God whose purposes are not limited by the strength of one champion. The four scenes also expose how fame distorts memory. Almost everyone knows David. Far fewer remember Abishai, Sibbecai, Elhanan, or this Jonathan. Yet without Abishai, David's story could have ended in exhaustion. Without the other three, the later challenge from Gath would remain unanswered. The narrator does not pause to turn them into celebrities. Their names are placed beside their acts, and then the story moves on. That restraint is part of the message. Faithfulness can shape history without becoming the title of the story. The men around David do not need to replace him. They extend what his earlier courage made imaginable. Leadership succeeds when the next act of courage no longer requires the original hero to perform it. So, was Goliath killed twice? The best answer is no. 1 Samuel presents David as the man who defeated Goliath of Gath. 1 Chronicles says Elhanan defeated Lami, Goliath's brother. 2 Samuel's wording appears to have suffered a textual disturbance, though the precise history of that disturbance cannot be proven. Were all four later warriors brothers of Goliath? The text does not say that. They are linked to Rapha and to Gath. Only Lami is explicitly called his brother in Chronicles. Were they Nephilim? Again, Scripture does not make that identification here. Were they giants in the sense of unusually formidable men associated with an old giant tradition? That is exactly how the narrative presents them. Goliath was not the last giant of Gath, but he was the last one David had to face alone. Years after the stone struck the famous champion, another giant found David weary. This time a servant stepped forward. Then another. Then another. Then another. The final giant story is therefore not a weaker echo of the first. It is the completion of it. The faith of one young shepherd has become the courage of a community. The lamp remains burning because others guard it. The taunts continue, but the fear no longer belongs to only one man to overcome. 4 warriors rise from the shadow of Goliath. 4 servants answer. And the city that once sent its champion into the valley watches its last remembered giants fall, one by one, before men whose names history almost forgot.